Okay, thank you everybody for joining us this evening for Natalie Ryan's presentation of Federal Relay Services and Solutions for Functional Equivalency in the Workplace. Without further ado, please welcome Natalie Ryan.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for your patience waiting for all the technical difficulties. Just so you guys know what my role is, I am the Federal Relay Account Manager with Sprint. And Federal Relay is a contract between Sprint and the General Services Administration. Actually, it's a contract that Sprint has held for over 21 years. And so part of that contract and part of my role is to work with different agencies, employees, as well as people in the general public to be sure that they're aware of the different types of telecommunication accessibility that there is within the federal government. So just a little background information on how Federal Relay even came to be. In 1988, it was passed by Congress as Public Law 100-542, kind of went along with all of the other ADA developments and all of those progressions that took place then. So as part of that, it was decided that there needed to be telecommunication service for people who were deaf, hard of hearing, or have speech disabilities for federal employees specifically, as well as opening up communication between the general public and federal agencies. So if you think about having to call the IRS during tax season, or Social Security Administration, or the FBI because you know some interesting information you need to share, so those kinds of situations you might need to utilize some type of a relay service, which is how Federal Relay came to be. Today, again, just to emphasize, we've been providing this service with the General Services Administration for over 21 years, and we're the only authorized GSA relay provider. So that means Sprint is the only company that holds a contract for all 6 different services that we provide to provide services to agencies as well as the general public to work with agencies. What that means is that our contract has different requirements than other providers that are out there. So when you're thinking of calling the IRS or the Social Security Administration, or when you work for the federal government, you know there's a lot of security concerns and things like that. Part of our contract is that we have to meet those security requirements that others are not necessarily required to meet. We have to basically exceed what other relay options have because other relay options are regulated by the FCC. The GSA contract has a few more regulations that we have to meet, so that's why it's a great fit for federal employees as well as conducting business with the federal government, because a lot of times that information is extremely sensitive. Today we actually work with over 80 different agencies, and that's really not even the maximum because we have a contract with 80 different agencies to provide services for their employees. However, if you think about an agency like the USDA, they have over 90 agencies underneath them. We work with agencies like the Department of the Interior, which has about 20 to 30 underneath them, as well as the Department of Defense. So that number 80 really translates into a couple hundred different agencies that we provide services to. Oh, here we go. We'll skip ahead to this slide, I guess. Okay, so we just spoke about the security. So this is a chart that kind of explains or highlights the difference between what is being used on a state level or under the FCC standards versus what is required by the federal government standards. So of course we have to conform with the FCC TRS standards, but then in addition to that, we have to go through a certification and accreditation, which basically means that They do web scanning and different types of penetration testing on all of our different internet-based services to make sure that hackers can't get into it, information can't be stolen. That's obviously a big concern nowadays, so we have to go through testing to ensure that that cannot happen in our services. We also have to provide information, including what's called a VPAT form, which shows that everything we have is Section 508 compliant. There are pages and pages and pages of GSA IT security standards that we have to meet, and we have to show evidence of meeting that. There's a program called FIPS 199, which has to do with, again, information processing over the internet, so we have to meet that. And then in addition to that, all of our captioners, operators, interpreters, they have to be United States citizens. Everybody has to provide confidentiality forms. We provide what's called a privacy impact assessment, which shows how private information is conveyed or stored or anything like that, and how secure that actually is. So as you can imagine, I could go on and on and on about all of the security requirements that we're required to meet, but the point is that these are unique to the Federal Relay services. And in addition to that, we have 6 different services, which actually some of the services that we provide are not available outside of the Federal Relay program due to the fact that they aren't recognized as an FCC service. So not only do we provide the traditional TTY and speech-to-speech, CapTel service and video relay, IP relay, but we also provide relay conference captioning, which I'll explain shortly, and video remote interpreting, which I'll also explain. So just real quick about how kind of the different services are split up. There are internet-based services, and that's kind of how everything is sort of transitioning nowadays. Everything is internet-based, mobile, so you can get on using the services on an iPad or on your mobile phone. But then we also do have telephony-based services in case of emergency, for example. Sometimes the internet-based services aren't going to work. So then we also have TTY, speech-to-speech, and then the traditional captioned telephone. So just so you know kind of the 2 directions that we're going in, and again, internet-based services seem to be really the desire of the community because they're so much more accessible in terms of not being tied to one location. A little bit more about why you should bring this information back if you are a federal government employee. I'm not sure, you know, of all 24 participants who does work for a federal agency or who doesn't. But if you know anybody or if you are a federal employee, it is important to think about the fact that the different services we have enable you to conduct your official duties. If you have a job and you want to move on to a different position that might require further time on the telephone, this actually allows you to do so, so it gives you advancement opportunities. It also allows for the general public to contact you and vice versa. Federal agencies are actually required by law to meet Section 504 as well as 508 for providing accommodations. So the fact that our service has 6 different types of services that kind of serve different communication needs allows them to meet that requirement. In addition, again, the stringent security requirements, we really try to emphasize that because it's really important to think about if you work for the Department of Defense, for example. Of course, there's sensitive information that's shared, so it would be wise to utilize the Federal Relay service. We do have the wide variety of services, so if your agency isn't really providing accommodations, for example, this is a good one-stop shop in order to make sure they're doing that. Just a little extra positive is that we have English and Spanish services, and even some of the services are English and Spanish translation. So that's great for obviously having to conduct business with those who speak Spanish. We do provide services in Puerto Rico, for example, so it's really important to be aware of the fact that we are accessible to a variety of languages. And then last but not least, we have over 21 years now of experience in providing relay services, and the reason why that's important is because our operators, our captioners, our interpreters, they all are familiar with federal terminology. So you can imagine that there's probably a lot of acronyms, a lot of terminology that's used within federal agencies, and so our staff is going to be more familiar with those and then therefore be more accurate. So I'll start here about just what some of the services are. I don't know if you're familiar or have heard of any of these before, so I'll start with Relay Conference Captioning, which is my personal favorite just because I think it really encompasses a lot of different needs. One problem that I've run into a lot when I go to trade shows and events is that a lot of people that have a hearing loss don't participate in staff meetings or agency-wide trainings or webinars or things like that because they're not sure how to make that accessible. So Relay Conference Captioning is a great tool to do so. The first slide is just an image of what it looks like. So the RCC is the abbreviation for it, so that's how I'll refer to it from now on. With RCC, you can be remote, so kind of like what you guys are experiencing now, those of you that are using the captioning, but you also can be in the same location. So if there's a situation where your staff is meeting in person and they tell you this afternoon that you're meeting tomorrow morning, there's obviously no time to get a CART provider into the office or an interpreter depending on your communication preference. And so this is a great tool because we only require 12 hours advance notification for federal employees to get the captioning service. And then other than that, all you need is an internet-connected computer and a telephone line for that captioner to be able to participate and hear so they can provide the captioning. So in this image, you're seeing an in-person meeting. That screen, the laptop screen, that's what the captioning will look like. And just so you guys know, everything is adjustable. So you can change the background color to white and the text to black. There's even yellow, blue, green, however you want to make it colorful. You can make this font much larger, much smaller. You can change the refresh rate so it can come across quickly or slowly. You can change even the font name, so it could be Arial, it could be Comic Sans, all of those things. And then in addition, this same screen has a button at the bottom that says transcript, and at the end of the call, depending on the security of the call, if you choose to retain a transcript, you're able to do so and save all of the notes. So all of that information I'll kind of go over again. It is live real-time captioning. It's real-time text that's streamed to an internet-connected computer. We have live captioners that are doing this. It's not voice recognition technology, which improves the quality and the accuracy. And then it allows for you to participate in conference calls or in-person meetings. There are other capabilities such as there's a little box at the bottom right that allows you to speak into the event. If you're not comfortable using your own voice, you can type into that box and the captioner will actually participate in the call on your behalf just like other relay providers or other relay services do. There's no special equipment. You can actually utilize it on an iPad so you don't have to be tied to a desktop computer, for example. And then here's just another image of what it looks like and the website. So if you want to take note of what that website is, fedrcc.us is where you would go to book the call and kind of see more information about it. We do have video clips there so you can see a little bit more about what different tips there are and how to book an event and all of that. So I'll talk about how to book an event just real briefly. At the FedRCC website that I just mentioned, there is a menu on the left, and as you can see, there's tips, an instructional video clip, and more information about that. There is an option that says book an event now. So the main thing to remember is that we need 12 hours advance notification. Now, if you only find out about a meeting in 2 hours, it does not mean don't try. It's just that's our contractual requirement that we will guarantee having a captioner available in 12 hours. If it's 2 hours in advance, you know, they'll try their best, but it's not necessarily going to be satisfied. And we highly recommend doing more than 12 hours advance notification if you're able to do so and you are aware of the event with more notification. This is basically what the form looks like. It's very simple, first name, last name. One thing that's important to remember is that the email address, it must be a federal government email address. We can't accept Gmail or Yahoo or anything like that because this is the way that we verify that it's for a federal agency or for a federal employee. Now, if you're not a federal employee, but there's some type of a federal presentation that you would be interested in joining, they do have a lot of like public forums. You can request that they make this request as well. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that you don't utilize this tool. There's also area for the teleconference phone number. As I mentioned before, you have to have a phone number or a webinar URL, kind of like what we're using today, in order for the captioner to join and be able to hear. It's also really helpful to provide the event title and any subject matter in advance for accuracy's sake. The other really important thing to note is that you are required to choose your federal agency name. So it's all listed in numerical order by what we call an agency bureau code. It's a 4-digit number that's attributed to every single agency that has access to these services. So after this webinar, if you're interested in utilizing this service, you think it would be beneficial, I'll provide my email address at the end, so you can shoot me an email and I'll tell you what your AB code is so that you can more easily find your agency in this drop-down. As I mentioned earlier, there's hundreds of agencies, so you can imagine that it would not be very easy to look at every single line item to find your particular agency, especially when they're not in alphabetical order, they're in AB code numerical order. And then I also mentioned the transcript option. So it's important to realize that some federal agencies have different security requirements than others. So with that said, if you would like for all of the participants to have access to the transcript and be able to save it, like kind of like minutes of a meeting, you can choose those options. However, if it is a confidential call, you can also choose to destroy the transcript after the event. It will be immediately destroyed. There's no way to retrieve it, and that information will not be retained. So it works both ways. And then just a little FYI, if you're not a federal employee right now, RCC is available in some states, specifically New Jersey, Hawaii, and North Carolina. So if you are a resident in one of those 3 states, you can also send me an email and I can help you kind of find access to that information. And then also just be aware, if you work for a corporation that might benefit from this service, that's also something that we can work with you on. So I just don't want you to think it's limited. We want to provide these types of accommodations to as many people as we possibly can. So just be aware that we're happy to find solutions and help you find a solution. Okay, the next service that we provide is the Caption telephone service. Many of you might be aware of this service already. But basically, it's the perfect service for those who don't hear very well on the phone, or maybe when you find yourself watching television, you have the closed captioning on, but you still utilize your own voice, you still speak for yourself. You don't want a relay operator intervening or supporting your part of the conversation. So that's where CapTel comes into play. And basically everything is real time, so the captions appear at the same time as the caller speaks with just a minimal delay. So that allows you to have a natural flow of a conversation. So you're not having to ask someone to speak up or repeat themselves or anything like that. Something that's unique about this service is that there's a couple different ways to obtain the CapTel phone, and once you do get the CapTel phone, the phone has an ESN number in it, and it becomes branded. So what happens is once you get that phone, it's already tied to your agency. It's already covered by that agency's contract with us to pay for the services. So there's nothing, if your supervisor is concerned about cost or anything like that, you won't get a bill. There's no long distance charges or anything like that. So just real quick, how to get the CapTel phone. If you are a federal employee, there is a program called the Computer Electronics Accommodations Program. I'm kind of skipping to the second bullet, but that is the free way to get the device. This program, we call it CAP, C-A-P. They're through the Department of Defense, and they do provide, they're kind of like an equipment distribution program. They provide all kinds of different accessible equipment to federal employees. So that's one way to go about it, and in that methodology, it is free. So if your supervisor is concerned again about a cost, then this would be the option to go. You also can just order the phone directly. Your supervisor can utilize a purchasing card if they have that. That's mainly the way that it's paid for, and it's $75 for the different types of equipment. And again, once that's ordered, it gets branded to your agency, and from then on, your agency or your location, your supervisor, or anything like that, they're not going to get a bill. And that's actually true for all of the services. When we have a contract with an agency, their headquarters and their contract is paying for the service. Your location is not receiving an invoice for any of the usage or anything like that, so it's not going to impact your budget or your usage. Okay, so the next service, this is kind of newer for us. We've been providing it since the last contract. We won the last contract in 2012, began providing this service, in January 2013. So we've been providing it for a year and a half now, and so this is great for if you do prefer to use sign language on occasion, or if you would like to kind of use that as a secondary to RCC, for example. This is providing a live remote interpreter on demand. So if you do prefer using sign language to communicate, a lot of times you need to give at least 2 days notice to have an interpreter come in. There's a 2-hour minimum for the conversation, and maybe your supervisor just wants to have a quick one-on-one conversation, just ask you how a project is going, or you know, something very simple and brief where you don't necessarily need to do that. But it's also not effective to write notes back and forth. So that's where this service becomes valuable. As you can see in the image, that's me actually. It's just showing kind of a scenario. I am using a phone in this image, but just so you know, a lot of video phone equipment has audio capability, so actually a phone is not necessarily required. The interpreter could be able to hear me, interpret for me via sign language, and then the sign language user would sign back and the interpreter would speak to me and I would hear them. So it's just a nice tool to use when you don't want to be writing notes back and forth. It's definitely not a tool to use for a large meeting and replacement of a live interpreter or live cart, for example, but it is a nice tool for those brief on-demand situations where you would rather have a better flow of conversation. Another really neat thing about the video remote interpreting, and this is actually the same for video relay service, which I didn't include in these slides because most people kind of are familiar with VRS and how that works. VRI is newer and more exciting. So the nice thing about both VRI and VRS is that you actually can use any type of video phone equipment, any mobile application, or computer software. It doesn't have to be a certain type of software or a certain video phone that connects to the Fed VRI interpreter or VRS interpreter. All you need are the toll-free numbers. So for VRI, the toll-free number is there at the bottom, 877-689-7775. Some agencies require an ISDN connection, so there's a different number for that, which is 855-724-6514. The important thing to note here is that, again, there's not a specific type of equipment that you would need to have in order to utilize this tool. In fact, when I demo this at agencies, to help them train, I actually bring my iPad. I bring up an application on my iPad, any application. I have quite a few actually, and I just dial that number and I'm able to connect to the VRI interpreter, and that's the same for VRS. So if any of you are interested in learning more about VRS and the number for that, again, my email address will be provided at the end, and I can also send it to Nancy in case she wants to share that information. This is kind of what it looks like on a mobile device. So it just shows how when you log on to, for example, an iPad and you have a Z5 software, for example, this is what the dial pad's going to look like. All you have to do is dial that logo right there. It won't be there. It will be your face, so you can make sure it's set up for the interpreter to be able to see you well. And then once you connect to that interpreter, the app I really highly recommend it because it's really, really easy in terms of the audio portion. So just kind of an image of what it might look like. And it's also really important to note, and part of the reason why I'm highlighting BRI over VRS for this particular presentation, is the fact that VRI is not recognized by the FCC as a service. So it's actually not available in general for the general public to utilize. For example, unfortunately, depending on a hospital or a lawyer's office, if they don't provide the service, it's not something that's reimbursable by the FCC, which is how most of relay services work. We were really fortunate that the GSA decided that this was really a tool that could be used by federal employees to be able to advance in their careers. And so with that said, they added VRI into our service offering. So we're able to provide this service through our contract, whereas we wouldn't have been able to before, or you wouldn't be able to under the FCC. So therefore, VRI is for people in the same location. So it's not necessarily, or it's not for a phone call outside of your area, but it's for having a one-on-one or two-on-one conversation with your supervisor, your coworker, for example, or a customer, and having that interpreter there, versus VRS is for making a phone call to someone who is in a remote location. Okay, Federal IP, so Internet Protocol. This is a great service as far as being text-based, and again, it's Internet-based, so this can be accessed from any type of Internet-connected computer or iPad, mobile device, etc. So this allows you to place relay calls using a text-based service. You can kind of see in the image below that that's what the main screen looks like. In this type of service, you are texting. It kind of looks like an IM, or you're typing. The operator is reading what you typed, and then they're able to relay that to the hearing party on the other line, and then types back what the person on the other line is saying to you. Let's see. This is just a screenshot of what our new website looks like. So as you can see, there's an area to choose your agency. There's an area to put your phone number to dial. Any dialing instructions you have, like for example, if the answering machine picks up, I don't want to leave a message, or things like that. And then also, it's really important to note that it is required that you register, and that is because we don't want to be processing any fraudulent calls that would impact your service experience. And so once you register, you get a 10-digit number. And on that 10-digit number, or through that 10-digit number, as long as you're logged in here, as you can see in the red box, it says log in. As long as you're logged in, you can actually receive calls and make calls at any time. Okay, so I kind of breezed through that pretty quickly, and I see Nancy has added in the chat box that if you have any questions, if you just would type them, and then Nancy can voice them, and I can answer any questions that you have. And then after questions, I'll share my contact information, our team's information, so you can contact us directly if needed.
While people are preparing their questions for Natalie, let me just add that this has been recorded, and we will record this or post this on our website along with Natalie's PowerPoint and her contact information too, in case anybody thinks of questions later and would like to email her. I'm so glad that you stuck with it, Natalie, and presented tonight, because I learned a lot from this presentation. And I'm sure that our attendees did too. Okay, one question from Adelaide. She says, as I understand it, this is not available for a board meeting of a nonprofit. The nonprofits cannot use it.
Okay, Adelaide, that's a good question. So it depends on, first of all, where you reside. So I spoke earlier about the fact that it is provided in Hawaii, North Carolina, and New Jersey as well. So if there's somebody that works there that is part of one of those states, they can actually request the service, not through the federal URL, but you know, it's a different URL, and I can send that to you afterwards if you're interested or if that applies. But in addition, if your nonprofit is interested and they need this service, you can also send me an email and we can work with you on a solution. As far as federal RCC, no, just because it's for the federal employees. But if you're conducting business with an agency or you're interested in providing the service within your nonprofit, then we can certainly work with you on that.
Natalie, for those people that are going to be attending the convention in St. Louis, are you planning to present about this service or all the services there?
Yes, I will definitely be there. I know we've been discussing that with our team, so I will be there. And if you guys want me to present, I'm happy to.
Of course, of course. I don't see any other questions in the box at the bottom, so unless I see any in the next minute or so, I guess we'll call it a night. I thank everybody again for your patience as we work through technical difficulties in the beginning. Gosh, computers are great when they're working, but when they're not, they really are trouble. Todd says also to Natalie, this is from Todd, you can also mention that HLAA chapters in one of those 3 states can use RCC to host the meeting and anyone in the U.S. can join.
And that's true. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, if there's HLAA chapters, and I know there are, of course, in the 3 states I mentioned, Hawaii, North Carolina, and New Jersey, they can utilize the RCC to host any type of meeting.
Good point. Thank you, Todd, for piping in there. Okay, again, thank you very much, Natalie. It's been a pleasure working with you to get this off the ground, and look for the recording to be posted on our website within hopefully the next couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody, and good night.
One more thing, Nancy, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware, right now on the slide, this is our contact information if you want to jot it down, federalrelay@sprint.com. And also, if you felt that this presentation was beneficial and you might want to bring it back to your agency, we will provide this free of charge to your agencies as well and give you more of a demo, live, one-on-one type of training. So if you're interested at all, email that email address right there, and I'll be happy to work out those logistics with you.
That's awesome.
And thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, again,
everybody.
Thanks, Natalie, and take care, everybody. Good night.